So thanks so much for joining again. I think we can start now. Yeah, just to put the face to the name. My name is Paul Kwesi Okran. I lead the HSL Carbon company. Is a subsidiary of iLife Solutions Limited. And we are strictly into sustainability services, and we are a one-stop shop sustainability service provider on the continent. I think I will switch off my video just to increase the bandwidth as well, just to make sure. I just switch it on initially just to put a face to the name as well. Great. So we, HSL Carbon, during this presentation, we'll be looking at a short introduction on HSL Carbon and the team. I'll be introducing shortly the team of Bernard Ayita and Abina Annan. We will try to understand what the carbon market is, then what Ghana is deploying in terms of the carbon market, and how do we understand the opportunities and the application process, and how can we position ourselves to also take part of this new market, where there's both the number of opportunities to take part. Yeah, so the team. So my name is Paul Kwesi Okran. I manage the company, and I'm in charge of carbon accounting, environmental and social governance, auditing, due diligence, and kind of positioning the financial institution, positioning financial institutions, also making them meet regulatory frameworks on all their sustainability frameworks as well. So we at HSL Carbon, we are a one-stop shop service provider in terms of sustainability. We focus broadly on three main services. One is what we are going to be talking about today, the carbon market. We do a lot of greenhouse gas accounting and management, emission trading, reduction as well. We develop carbon projects as well. We do also a lot of environmental and social management system. We develop robust ESG and ESMS management system for both financial institutions, MSMEs as well, to kind of move them from wherever they are now and take them to the goal of meeting global standards in terms of sustainability reporting as well. We do a lot of ESG due diligence on behalf of financial institutions, DFIs, MFIs, IFIs as well, when they want to undertake any transaction that's looking at de-risking their portfolio as well. So for us at HSL Carbon, we are one-stop shop sustainability services provider. So what do we mean by the carbon market? And please feel free to drop your questions. We have our team members, Bernard also will be speaking soon, and Abina, they'll be able to provide all the answers in the chat. If you have any questions in the chat, we'll be able to support you with that. What do we mean by the whole concept of the carbon market? Largely is more of an emission and carbon trading scheme, where we all know that our carbon emissions, our trajectory of emissions, we need to achieve the net zero carbon globally to be able to reduce the impact of climate change we have now. Although we have what we've done, we have what we call the concept of the locked-in carbon, where whatever we do, whether we do something in the short or medium term, we are still going to experience the impact of climate change. But what can we do as entities now? What frameworks can we put in place as entities to be able to reduce what we call our carbon footprint and chart the path towards the net zero? That's the whole concept of the carbon market. So we have, for example, if we have an entity A, like a manufacturing company A, who is emitting carbon, is able to invest or is able to invest or is able to invest or take part in a carbon to purchase carbon credit from another entity that is doing developing carbon credits, just to offset his or that entity's carbon emission. So it's more of a trading, creating an emission balance. So the entity creates that emission, which are emissions which are not avoidable for now, and is able to offset that footprint by purchasing a credit, which is carbon credit. And carbon credit is developed by what we call the carbon project that largely tends to remove carbon emissions from the atmosphere. We are using carbon emissions generally in a generic term here, because all those emissions or gases that causes climate change, we call them greenhouse gas emissions, but largely globally we want to categorize them as carbon emissions, just to make it as simple as possible for us to understand. So it is just a trading system. We have an emitter that wants to offset their carbon footprint, then it goes to a carbon sequestration project, purchases the carbon credit and trades it with money, pays for that with currency, and gets the feedback in emission in carbon credits. So what do we mean by what are the main carbon market instruments? The carbon market instruments are not new concepts. They are not new instruments. One, we have the clean development mechanism. We have the voluntary carbon market already in place, and we have the Article 6 market. The CDM, what we call the clean development mechanism, is a market or economic mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol, which looked at how developed countries can reduce their footprint by investing direct investment in projects in developing countries. So the country needs to reduce their footprint by X tons of CO2, invest in a carbon reduction project, probably in typical Ghana, and quantify that emission reduction and purchase that to offset their own carbon emission. So largely it is emission reduction that targets investing in emission reduction projects in developing countries, and is largely designed to CDM was designed to promote sustainable development and contribute to the reduction in the global greenhouse gas emissions. Then we move to the voluntary carbon market, and it is just the opposite of a compliance market, in the sense that the trading of the carbon offset is not to meet regulatory obligations. So it is something voluntary that you want to take part in. So the companies buy the carbon credit to show goodwill. Okay, I need to show my financials that I'm considering my impact on the environment, what I need to show my community that I'm giving back to the community as well. The compliance market is where the companies have emission reduction target. So either voluntary or the compulsory market. Under the voluntary, you are doing it more of a CSR, more of you meeting your personal goals. But under the compulsory compliance market, you are doing this to have, because you have targets of emissions to be reduced, probably set by national policies or set by international framework that needs to be reduced. Then you are able to participate in that. Then Article 6 is also a mechanism. Article 6 came about from, it's just one of the articles of the Paris Agreement, where the Paris Agreement is now the standard for sustainability, compliance, and alignment. And my colleague Bernard is going to be talking about this in detail. And this Article 6 looks at how we can set up carbon markets and trade carbon savings also. And this is also being deployed largely in Ghana. Then what do we really mean by the articles, by the Paris Agreement? Largely, the Paris Agreement is a treaty signed by a number of countries, and the whole aim is looking at the trajectory of where we are, where before the pre-industrial era. If you plot, and this is one of the key bases of climate change. If you plot the graphs of carbon emissions against temperature from pre-industrial area, you will find a flat graph. But during the industrial area, during the beginning of the industrial era up to this time, if you plot that graph, you will see a direct upward correlation between the CO2, the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and the amount of and the increase in the temperature. So you can say correlatively that the CO2 increase, the more we pump CO2 into the atmosphere, the warmer the atmosphere becomes, largely. So now, the Paris Agreement was just saying that, okay, we need to hold the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees and above the pre-industrial levels, but we should aim at achieving a 1.5 degrees target, pre-industrial level. So to achieve this, both after signing these treaties, all countries need to go back and develop what we call the NDCs, the nationally determined contributions, where they need to set targets and voluntary targets and make sure that they are contributing their quota to achieve this temperature goal, because the Paris Agreement largely is a temperature goal where we need to reach a peaking point in terms of temperature increase and create a deep cut also, so that we can have a balance of carbon emissions towards net zero. Now, most of these emissions in the atmosphere are caused by our human activity due to the industrial era development, our changes in lifestyle patterns, and those are all categorized as anthropogenic emissions. So our emissions in gigatons of CO2, we want it to peak. From the graph, you will see that we want the emissions to peak and gradually reduce towards having positive atmospheric CO2 rising, and achieving a net zero emission at some point, where we will also have the possibility of achieving the net zero target and reducing our carbon emissions drastically in there. So largely now we've been able to establish that one of the mechanisms to achieve this net zero target is the carbon market, where how can we catalyze the market to make sure that now we need to reduce. We've been able to establish that CO2 rise in the atmosphere causes increase in temperature. Increase in temperature causes global warming. Everything leads to climate change. So how do we reduce that and reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere? That is the whole concept of the carbon market, where we want to make sure that can we create a market force that will reduce the carbon emissions in the atmosphere through trading of carbon through trading of the carbon. Now I'll let my colleague take us through the overview of the Ghana NDCs, our target in terms of emissions. What are the projects we've looked at? What are the quantities we want to reduce? What are the quantities we want to trade on the Article 6 framework that I said earlier that we are developing in Ghana? I Bernard, please come in.
Yeah, Paul, thanks a lot for the interesting introduction to this. So my name is Bernard, and my work is around greenhouse gas management and then also carbon market project development. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. So let me share my screen from where Paul ended. Okay. All right, so hope my screen is sharing.
Yes, it's sharing. You just need to go to there. Yeah.
Okay, so the driver of this market, as Paul has said, is the goal to reach net zero, and by reducing our emissions, and then the companies to take actions to reduce their emissions. So the Paris Agreement is now driving this market. So under the Paris Agreement, about 196 countries. Let me give a very short intro to the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement was like a treaty that governments around the world have signed to take actions to reduce their carbon footprint so that we can keep the temperature increase to below 2 degrees and then ensure that is around 1.5 by mid-century. So by this, it also means that they have to show commitment to what they call nationally determined contribution. So under the nationally determined contributions called NDC, you should always have to differentiate between this and the political party in Ghana. So the nationally determined contribution by countries spell actions that they want to take to mitigate the impacts of climate change. So it's action against climate change is in two folds. The adaptation, which deals with we have the problem. So how do we cope with the impact that we are facing? For instance, there's increasing frequency of flood in Accra, for instance. So how do we deal with that? So the measures that we take to address that are adaptation measures. And the other measure, which is categorized as mitigation, is to prevent further generation of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And then these greenhouse gases, as Paul said, are responsible for warming the planet. So out of the 196 countries that signed on to the Paris Agreement, Ghana is one of them. And as the agreement requires, you have to show commitment or bring actions on board that you are taking to reduce your emissions. The global total annual emissions per year is around 49 gigatons. And countries have to take actions to reduce this so that we can get at least half of it by 2030. So Ghana submitted an NDC among other 196 countries, and in our actions is 47 actions in all, but 13 of them are adaptation actions. As I said, they are to reduce the impact of climate change on Earth. And then the 34 mitigation actions are to address emissions that Ghana is contributing to the atmosphere. So someone is by mistake. All right. So out of that 34 actions that Ghana has, there's also what we call conditional and non-conditional, unconditional mitigation actions. So conditional means that these actions we only take them when we don't have the money to do them, but when we get international support or some other finance from somewhere, the private sector, for instance, will be able to do them. And unconditional, like we have the resources, so with and without support from anywhere, we can do it. So as you can see, out of the 34, for the conditions of this country, we can fulfill to do 9 of them, and then the other will require international support to do this. So the 9 unconditional will amount to 25 megatons of CO2 equivalent. As I said, the global emissions are around 49 gigatons. So we are saying we have to do 24, which is very minute of the global emissions. And if we receive some more support, we can reduce by 39 megatons of CO2 emissions. But out of that 39 megatons, we are saying that one of the ways that we can conditionally generate money to finance them is through the carbon market. So we are willing to sell 23 megatons of CO2 equivalents to generate money or to have money to finance our climate action. So I want to create a link between the Paris Agreement and then the market itself. So this is how the Paris Agreement is actually linked to the market. So as countries have made these commitments, okay. All right. So as countries have made these commitments, it's not every country that can have the resources or all the things available to implement this action. So some will require finance. And an example I normally use is Singapore. If you take Singapore, you have a very small piece of land that, as we have been talking about adopting renewable energy like solar, and then clean energy like nuclear. Singapore cannot do that because they don't have land for solar, like huge solar farms. So they have to find a way, other means of mitigating their action. The other thing is, if you take the size of Singapore, if they should have a nuclear plant that there is an accident, a nuclear accident, means that the whole of that country will be wiped out. So how can a country like Singapore then contribute to emission reduction? How can they? So I'm using this to illustrate how countries trade, or how the trading is between countries. So we have this country A. You can think of country A as Singapore, and you can think of country B, which is Ghana, for instance, that we have a refinery, and then we have a refinery, for instance, or we have a crude oil extraction, offshore crude oil extraction, for instance, that we do that, and then as a result, we release methane and other methane, carbon dioxide, and other, very, very potent gases that warm the environment into the atmosphere. And we also have a forest. And you can think of country C as a country that is in a balance between, right now, they have achieved what we call the net zero, they don't have much, they have been able to offset their emissions. So they don't have so much emissions. They don't have emissions and they don't have sinks. So let's see how the trade is going to be. So what is going to happen is actually Ghana and Singapore has an agreement, which I'm using this to depict. So what is happening is that Singapore wants to buy, Ghana has the ability to capture methane and or flare other gases that is produced at our refinery or at the oil extraction sites. And then we can generate about 100 CO2. Yes, 100 megatons of CO2, for instance, which we will sell to Singapore. So what is happening here is that although Singapore does not have the ability to implement these structures in their country, they can buy these carbon credits from Ghana, who has resources to implement this. And that will be, they will use that to offset their emissions. So if Singapore has gotten this and they have to report to the UNFCCC on actions, they will report that they bought these actions from Ghana, which we call internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, or ITMOs, to offset their emissions. And that will be transferred to them. And then they call something corresponding adjustment. So who as Ghana will transfer that to them and we'll take money from them for each ton of credits. They call it certified emission reduction for each unit of certified emission reduction that is sold to them. So that's a typical example. Another example is that you can see Ghana has a forest and we can also flare our gases. So another thing that we can do is, which is actually happening right now, is that we have employed the Red Plus program, which is also a market mechanism that we are saying that we will not destroy our forest. We'll keep the forest where plants will take up the CO2 in the atmosphere. And we can quantify this by the size of the forest and then the time that the forest has taken to see how much of CO2 it has taken from the environment. And then we can sell to an aviation company. And aviation too is quite limited in the options that they can deploy right now in terms of emission reduction. This is because they rely on kerosene as fuel, and we are now developing other fuel alternatives for the aviation sector. So Ghana can sell this credit to the aviation sector, which the aviation sector is one of the ready buyers in Ghana right now. And then you can talk of country C2, which also has some kind of emission reduction that they can sell to the aviation sector, because they have 200, let's say, megatons or megatons of CO2 to mitigate, and they need to do that because they have said that in their NDCs. That's what they have communicated that they are going to reduce. So they have to buy the 200. Not the aviation sector is not under the NDC, but for countries that have targets under the NDC, they can use this as an option to buy this offset from other countries to do it. So it's people always think of this as is making people not to take action. But what is happening is that by them not taking action, they have caused someone to take action on their behalf, and they are using that credit to offset their emissions. But the aviation sector too is now facing a lot of regulatory issues, and then they are under the compliance market, for instance, in some other places. So they also have to buy these credits to offset their emissions. So each emission reduction sold comes with some monitoring transfer, and the reason is that this monitoring transfer is what incentivizes people to take action. Because if people know that, okay, I'm going to build a solar project, and apart from how much the savings that I'm going to make from this project, I can also quantify and sell the emission reductions that I've done as an extra income. They will be incentivized to undertake side projects. So Ghana has become a hotspot for carbon credit buying of late, all because of one of the wonderful works that have been done. And then I'll take this opportunity to acknowledge Dr. Benefu of the EPA Carbon Market Office, who has helped Ghana to develop their first Article 6 framework. So that framework that Ghana has developed is like, we have spelled out how a carbon market should behave in Ghana and the requirements and everything that it needs for operationalization. So that's one of the milestones that the country has achieved. And so far, we've had some bilateral agreements between Ghana and Sweden, Switzerland, Singapore, and Korea. And I already explained why Singapore is in dire need of carbon credits to buy. So that has been done. And then when you take the Article 6, which is under the Paris Agreement, which is the markets that I'm emphasizing on, is it has three components. The Article 6.2, which allows two countries to talk to each other and come out with a plan on how they are going to do this trade. And the 6.4, which is more like the CDM that Paul spoke about. And then that one is centralized and it's being governed by a body. So it's not like a bilateral, it's not a one-on-one agreement. It's more like a centralized process. And then the 6.8, which some people call the adaptation benefit mechanism. So that is not really a mitigation. It doesn't have much to do with mitigation. It has to do with other benefits other than greenhouse gas emissions. So talking about, I hope by now you have a clear picture of the carbon market in Ghana. So it's as a result of the Paris Agreement. That's the number one thing. The second thing is countries have made commitments. Now, under that commitment, it's not every country that has the resources to develop or meet their targets. So some countries will need to go and find people to take that action on their behalf, and then generate. And then by people taking that action on their behalf, they can purchase the emission reductions and use it to offset their emissions. So in Ghana, the Article 6.2 has been officially operationalized, which include the development of the framework and then the institutional arrangement of which institution is doing what by so far as this market is concerned. So the other thing that is very important to say is that the government cannot generate all the 23 megatons of credit that we say we are going to sell. Most of it is going to be through private sector action. So this webinar, for instance, is to make the private sector aware. Almost all the projects or most of the projects is going to be a private sector initiative. So the Article 6 market office is like the coordinator of the markets, which facilitates the transaction in the private sector and then the buyers, for instance. So how can one participate in this market? One can participate as a project owner. So for instance, if you are a real estate developer and then you have implemented solar in your estate, for instance, you own that project, but there's someone who has to help you to develop the project for the carbon market. So the developer is more like the one who prepares the documentation and all the processes that you need to go through to get the money or to get the credits bought by somebody. So that's what we do, for instance. Then we have validating entities. I will explain the process to you, so I'll emphasize who's the validating and verification entity. Then there are brokers, very interesting people in the market, and they are, brokers like cotton for they buy and they sell, they buy the credit from one person, they sell to other people. And we have people who buy directly. So the buyers in this instance can be other countries who want to use it to meet their NDC target. It can be the aviation sector who wants to use it to meet their compliance. And it can also be the voluntary market where we are saying that people just want to buy it to show goodwill. And you can be CSOs or NGOs who want to create awareness on this. So who can participate? So actually, any legally legally registered entity in this country can participate in this market. So you have government ministries, departments and agencies, public sector, private sector as well. Once you are legally registered in Ghana or internationally, you can undertake this, but it doesn't deal with individuals. You must be a legally registered entity. So the whole activity development process is divided into three: the pre-activity development, implementation, and insurance, and then transaction. So I'll take some time to explain what happened at each stage. So in brief, the pre-activity development basically has to do with preparing the right documentation for approval before you go on to undertake the actual project. And once you take the project is verified, and I'll explain what all these things are in a minute. So the entry, this is the cycle, and then there are different bodies who are in charge of this. So for instance, we have the developer, the auditors who are basically the validators and verifiers, the national authority who is in charge of this, then receiving party or the party who is buying from you. So the entry application is where we assess your eligibility for the market. So is your company registered, for instance? But first, you have to have an activity that qualifies for the carbon market. So we'll have another webinar on this that will do the NDC and then the Article 6 red and white list. So if you read the Article 6.2 framework, Ghana has listed activities that they can authorize or can undergo the Article 6.2 can participate in Article 6.2 market, and then those that cannot. So if you take, actually, I think the projects that cannot participate are forestry kind of projects, but other than that, any other project that I know, from solar to hydro to biogas to composting to whatever, they can all go through except the forestry programs. So that's for the entry. Then you go to the activity preparation. So that preparation starts with, you have to write what they call mitigation activity idea notes, and then you have to send to the MESTI requesting for what they call letter of intent. So when they send you the letter, what you are doing is you are just writing a short letter to them, telling them what you want to do, and they'll give you a letter of intent, which is like, okay, we acknowledge what you want to do, so show us more of what you want to do. So after that, you will write another documentation called mitigation activity development document, which is MADD. So that document is more like a very comprehensive document. So that you have to use, we have standards for developing projects, just like that standards for any international thing that you do. So you use that standard to develop the MADD. And then once that is developed, or you are done with that, you will have someone, an external organization, to validate it. So to validate that, yes, you have followed the right procedure, I mean, you have followed the right guideline, and then the project will actually lead to emission reduction. So once that you have gotten an external party to do that validation. So when I spoke about the players, I mentioned validating entities. So what they do basically is there are companies that when you prepare your documentation for the carbon market, they validate that you use the right standard and you are following due procedure to get things done. So another important step in this is what we call the authorization. So after your document is ready, you submit it again to the carbon market office, and then they will review whatever is in that document. And then after, when people validate, they have to write a report on top of what you submitted. So they will have to review what you have done, and then the report that comes with it. And then then you have to write a request for what they call letter of authorization. Letter of authorization is that they have given their approval to approve the transfer of the credit that will be generated from the project to the receiving party, which I've mentioned who can the receiving party be in this case. Then the last process for the development process is registration. So once your activity has been authorized, there's a place where Ghana will register all activities that have been authorized. So if you have not been authorized, being authorized is a very big step. Like once you have been authorized, then you go on to be registered. So then you'll be registered on what we call the Ghana Carbon Market Registry, where anyone can go there and see what projects have been registered, and they can show interest in that if you don't have a buyer yet. So after that, then this when you are going to do the real work on the ground. So you are going to implement the project. So if I take, for instance, a biogas project, for instance, it qualifies. So you have to register your business, and then you do the documentation, it gets verified, it gets authorized, it's listed on the Ghana Carbon Market Registry. So this list, sorry, it's not listed. It's quite technical. So it's registered on the Ghana Carbon. I'll get to what listing is. So it's registered on there. Then you then go to, if the project is not already there, then you have to go and do actual implementation of the project. And once you've done this implementation, according to the document that you develop that and the guidelines that govern that project development. So every project, every single project has a guideline for how it is developed. So there are experts who can do biogas, but they cannot do solar project because their specialty is in biogas project development, and it can be otherwise. So once you are finished implementing the project, you have to go back to an external party to come and verify that you have the project that you have implemented, one, ensures what we call environmental integrity. The environmental integrity means that the project that you are implementing, the purpose of it is to lead to emission reduction. But if the project leads to increase in emission reduction, it means that it has not ensured environmental integrity. So what environmental integrity means that the project has led to emission reduction as it's intended to do. Then the second one is to verify for what we call safeguard, environmental safeguard. That's to ensure that it does not have any other social, economic, or environmental adverse effects on people, and also to verify that you follow the right measures. So on top of that, the verifier will write another report, and then you submit again to the carbon market office that they will examine this, and then they will do the examination report on that. So if you have been able to go through this successfully, then you should be happy by now, because that's where you'll be issued credit. So I want to explain the authorization is an approval that you are involved in a project that will lead to emission reduction, and they approve that they will transfer they have indicated their approval to ensure transfer of that to the buyer. But that is just acknowledging the project. The issuance is what you are going to sell, the actual credit. And it's a quantity that has been verified by the verification process that your project has caused. What I mean is the emission reduction that the verification has authenticated that your project has achieved, that it will be issued to you in what we call certified emission reduction unit. So if you have that, then you can be listed. And I spoke about listing already. So the listing is more like you have the credits, the project has been verified and all that. So when the project is listed, it's listed with all the verification reports that has happened. So if any buyer wants to buy, they go to verify this document and see that, okay, all the questions that are supposed to be asked have answers in this project. And therefore, you transfer the credits. So you transfer the credits now to the buyer. And then there's what we call settlement, which is if there's any payment for it, you receive that payment for the credit. And depending on the quality of the project, a ton of emission reduction average in Africa is right now around, I think, $5 or so. That's per the Red Plus project that I spoke about. But if you ensure higher, the methodologies that are used in this can be highly verified, and then there's proper transparency about the project, you can have a higher price. In the EU, the EU is now reaching over $100 for a unit. So the list that I've seen for a project in Ghana is 31,000. So if you multiply the 31,000 kilotons times the 5, you might be having a lot of money from it. So after that settlement, then we do the corresponding adjustment is more of an ownership transfer. So the credit was yours and we have transferred it to somebody. So that corresponding adjustment must happen so that the credit is officially transferred to the receiving party. And once it gets to the receiving party, you don't own it again, the person owns it. And if it is a broker, you can go ahead and sell it to another entity. Or if it is any of those countries that want to meet their target, they can use it to meet their target then and retire it. So for the developers or project owners, our participation will be around I think the deep blue side. Yes, the deep blue side. And then for the rest will be handled by other people. So another important thing is the reporting, and reporting is more like a national thing, but you as an entity that has implemented this, from time to time, you have to be reporting on the project to ensure that the project is ongoing and everything, all right procedures or activities that are supposed to be carried out are being carried out on the project. And this is to ensure that people just don't get the money and then the project collapse. When that happens, it means that so it used to be like that, but what has happened now is the reduction should occur before you are, like, the reduction has occurred and verified and before you are paid for, so that it's not like you have taken money and then it didn't occur. So there's something that's happened over the years. And so this reporting is important as an entity that we are participating in, as a national body, that we also report to the UNFCCC. We also have to report on any transactions that we have had. So we'll do another presentation just on the red list and white list, what can be approved and what cannot be approved under the Article 6 voluntary and non-voluntary markets. Yeah. So
Hi, Bernard. If you can round up because of
yeah,
time, so that Abina can also.
this is the last slide. So there's what we call support for development. So people, you can actually get support to develop your projects. And one of this is the Click Foundation has a support for development that you can get about 150,000 USD to develop a carbon market project, and they will negotiate with you how much they will buy the credit that are generated from it. The other thing is, I spoke about authorization. We can also have a pre-authorization letter that you can request for. So when you have the pre-authorization, which is an approval for transfer of the credit, a financial institution, and then you can use that to secure fund for the project. So I'll end it, and then I want to acknowledge one friend of mine who has been of great support for me in my career, Emmanuel Adade, who joined in this meeting, and I acknowledge you, friend. Thanks. So that ends it, and I hand over to you.
Yeah, Bernard, thank you very much. Hello, please, can you hear me?
Yes, Abina, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm seeing some really interesting questions in the chat. So I'm just going to do a slide, quickly wrap up for us, then we take the questions and answers, because it's really interesting. So for my two colleagues who have presented, we'll now ask ourselves, what's the way forward? What are the next steps? And this program we are doing is in two phases. So we are doing a carbon market awareness and the accelerator program. So the awareness is what my two colleagues have done so far, basically giving us an idea of what the carbon market is, how it works, the importance of it for the private sector, and the kind of projects, because I'm sure most of us are from institutions and from organizations that may be interested to see the opportunities that you can get for your organizations or your institutions. So that's something that we are doing. And then we are also going to, and we have already done that with further webinars, we are going to let you know the different types of markets that are available so that you find the ones that are suitable to you. And then the requirements and how eligible you are, how your organization is eligible to take some, how the application processes, and where you can get all the help that you need. So quickly, I'll move on to the Carbon Market Accelerator Program. So this program is a program that we are running, and it has three phases. For the first phase, which is assessing eligibility, our team is looking at the various prospects that are eligible for the carbon market. And this team is going to help you develop tools set up by the Ghana Carbon Market Office. And like my colleagues have earlier presented, there are some rules that are very technical, there are some operations that are very technical, and you need a team that will guide you, that will guide your organization to undertake some of these. And like Bernard earlier mentioned, it is not for individuals, it's strictly for legally registered companies. You need a bankable green business idea. The idea and the projects that you are going to bring forth should be something that we can sell out and should be able to get a buyer. And then the financing options that are there. So my colleagues mentioned about the Article 6 and the framework that has been developed for Ghana. And we are saying, one of the rules is saying that for a project that is already being financed, it does not qualify. So some of these issues are things that you need a team to help you with. And that is part of the program that we are running if you have interest in it. Also, we help in preparing the necessary documentation. So like the earlier mentioned, you will need your company registration documents, you need some financial statements where necessary, and you need other documentations like the emission scenario. So my colleague Bernard mentioned about the project we are having with Switzerland, and in the project is a rice project, and because this market is strictly mitigation, That is, it's looking at reducing carbon emissions. It is necessary that we get to know the exact, establish a baseline for what the situation is. Then later we can go ahead and do other researches to find out, to see the changes that are happening, to see if you really earn the credit, and that, like he said, someone is not just paying for no work done. So all these are very technical issues that the team can help you with. And once we are done with helping you to assess your eligibility as an organization, as a corporation, as a body, and getting your necessary documents, we can also assist with the actual implementation. That is, we enroll you into the carbon market. So we unleash you into the market and we guide you with advice and how to work with the framework that has been mentioned already. And then as you are implementing, you are looking at how you are monitoring the monitoring processes and even the post-implementation processes, which Bernard mentioned about transactions and the reporting. So to round it up, this is what the program is about. This is what you have in store. We have in store for you. If you are interested, you kindly contact the contact that is on the sharing on the screen right now. You can give us a call, you can send us an email, you can also visit our website. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abina. Thanks, Bernard. Yeah, I think the time was short for this huge topic, but the conversation is going to continue. Just to keep to time, we had said we will use 1 hour for this. The conversation is going to continue. Please feel free to reach out on the various channels, via website, email, or just drop a message on the mobile. We had a number of questions, but I think by the end of the project, the presentation, we're able to answer some. One of the questions was the price of the carbon, of a ton of carbon, CO2 equivalent, depending on the type of projects that you are developing. It can range from as low as $5 and even as high as $120 per ton as well. We had a question on what are some of the opportunities for businesses. Is an extra stream of income for you if you are able to develop projects and sell the carbon footprint as well. If you're able to work and develop, package this project and sell the emission, that's extra income for your business as well. Will the recording be shared? Yes, we will look at sharing the recording and the slides as well. And the other question was around what type of projects can we do that are eligible for the carbon market. We'll be having in the next session to go into details what kind of projects are eligible for the carbon market in Ghana, and what are the kind of projects that are not eligible, looking at the framework of Article 6 we are looking at. And I think largely those were the questions in there. And I think we would really like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join this webinar. This is the first of so many to come. At least we'll be having these sessions looking at what we did today was just the introduction to the carbon market, how you can take part, the opportunities, and the application process. The next one, we'll be looking at the projects that are eligible and how we can further support you as well. So I would like to bring the webinar to a close and really thank you for the time as well. And please reach out to us via email, mobile, or check our website out, and all our contacts are there. Looking forward to further collaborations with everyone, and thanks again for joining. Have a good afternoon. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.